death! My wife for death!
Yes, man, yes, he has a name. Show some respect.
It's the headmaster. Get out of it. He's got something to say. I notice for you all.
Who are all these people?
Well, I'm Stephen Fry, for one, and I hope all you good people are dutiful licence payers, or like Spike, over 75 and about to get your telly for nothing. Welcome to this little celebration of two of the BBC's most remarkable series, Gormenghast, in which I played a humble part, and Walking with Dinosaurs, where I'm glad to say I didn't. Both of them feature an amazing menagerie of characters. Oh, please? Well, I'm glad we're separated by at least 50 million years. In Walking with Dinosaurs, these once real creatures were brilliantly, painstakingly recreated using all kinds of computer and other special effects, then set in a range of real backgrounds chosen from around the world.
These are the first dinosaurs, and this is where our story begins.
Walking with Dinosaurs didn't have a single real person in it, unless you include Kenneth Branagh.
How dare you!
By contrast, here we are in the bowels of Gormenghast, Mervyn Peake's surreal city of the imagination, with its sometimes comical, sometimes grotesque characters, all bound together in a feudal but crumbling class system. Flay, the faithful servant of the Earl, spies on his enemy Swelter, the despotic cook, here seen honing his trusty chopper.
My little precious.
I found one, Doctor.
Wrong sex, you idiot.
You bring the female goat, you fool.
Gormenghast is a fantastic mixture of comedy, black deeds, murder, madness and mayhem.
Mr. Fly!
Its class structure and its arcane traditions both contain the seeds of their own destruction.
4 o'clock. Blessing the meat racks.
The ruthlessly ambitious Steerpike, kitchen boy turned scheming revolutionary, sets out to destroy the one and dominate the other.
It's almost too easy.
By encouraging the Earl's sisters to burn down his library, he drives the old man mad.
Lordship. Lordship. My books. My book.
My husband is now an owl, Master Chalk. I'd say it was an improvement.
The new Earl, Titus, learns to hate Gormenghast, but confronts and finally destroys Steerpike.
Goodbye, Mother.
Titus.
You were lucky.
So, what do they have in common, except for the use of our money? Well, risk. Both were said to be impossible to make. Too complex. Many years of planning and research, burning passion, steely editorial resolve, and the very best craft skills. A combination that maybe only the BBC can draw together. And they had some trickery in common, as we shall see. Walking with Dinosaurs depended on a mixture of scientific evidence and speculation about how these creatures moved, looked, sounded, and behaved. We know what size they were from skeletons. Even the fossilized contents of their stomachs have been preserved, and they suggest what they ate and the sort of places they lived in. From these remains, it was possible to construct accurate models. I suppose you might call this the Pleistocene period. Next, the team used lasers to scan these into a computer. The computer then created a sort of wire mesh frame replica of the outer surface of each creature. This, in turn, was turned into a solid but flat-looking three-dimensional shape. Then came skin textures, some based on real animals. These were electronically painted on to make the completed creature. The major challenge for the series was making these models move realistically. Elaborate studies of real creatures of a similar bulk were used to get some idea, and the rules of how they moved were largely worked out using inspired guesswork and a good bit of science. Animating each 3D computer model first meant moving the imaginary skeleton using these rules and then making the skin and flesh heave and throb in a lifelike way. All this was done frame by frame, by hand, by the animators. A lot was conjecture. The colour of dinosaurs is something we can only guess at. And what did they sound like?
Who did I find it most difficult to work with? Animators.
I don't think the accent's quite right, so let's just stick to roaring, shall we? I wonder if they died out because they smoked too much, or was it really that comet that finished them off? And how did they spend their spare time? No, let's just stick to fighting, eating, oh, and mating, of course. But what kind of world did these creatures live in? Certainly nothing like leafy bucks or the Malvern Hills. For one thing, there was no grass in their day, so the production team scoured the earth for places scientists believed their environments were like. This is a plain in Chile with its ferns and monkey puzzle trees. Using a meticulously devised storyboard, they filmed these places, anticipating the story in precise detail. Then, later on, they added the computer models. Both series used the same techniques to combine different elements. So, let me show you. Over there's a live camera looking at this row of a few of the wonderfully detailed models from Gormenghast. They're all built to different scales, but from the camera's point of view, you can see that they give the impression of stretching into the distance. Now, I'm in a studio backed only by this blue cloth here and with these bits of wood. Where the camera sees blue, electronics switch to the other picture. So lo and behold, here I am in front of the city. These blue screen techniques are used all the time in film and television for different special effects. But there's much, much more to it than that. So, back to the dinosaurs. The computer models needed to be lit to match the lighting in the backgrounds. The dinosaurs needed to cast realistic shadows and to have shadows cast on them, calling for more layers of computer animation. Then they needed to seem to interact with their surroundings. So, on location and in front of the camera, grown men splashed about in water, moved trees, kicked and jumped around to move things in the way that the dinosaurs might have done. Not very dignified, but useful. And back in London, when the real location shots were joined with the models, the production team were then hidden or masked out. And here's a final touch, a computer-generated reflection in the water. But there's a limit to what you can do with computer models. Close-ups, for example, of dinosaurs pulling at leaves or tearing at flesh needed a different approach. The use of real models made of latex sometimes worked mechanically, often with a helping hand up the backside. Occasionally, these models were seamlessly combined with the computer models.
Lipluridon. At 150 tons, it is the largest and most powerful carnivore ever to live on the planet.
So, this is how the BBC brilliantly recreated in, I think it was Spike Milligan's immortal words, a time where no human eye had ever set foot. We've got some of the dinosaur models actually used in the series here on your left, so have a good old wallow and look at them later.
Why not?
Why not, indeed. Anyway, by a useful coincidence, the supposed descendants of the dinosaurs today are the birds, and Mr. Chalk here is the animal star of the Gormenghast cast, the only albino rook with an equity card.
We budgeted a CGI, a computer-generated sort of image, to create a puppet rook, and that was going to cost something like £750,000, which obviously we couldn't do. I opened the paper and there was an article that said, "Boy of 10 saves white albino rook." And my eyes popped out like in the mask, you know, so boing, like that. And we said, please train this rook for film work, and you've got a year to do it. Go.
and they got him used to noise by putting old tapes of Till Death Us Do Part in his cage with him, so that he would be used to this appalling man shouting and screaming.
Split, shrink, decompose, but never, never disappear!
Gormenghast's author, Mervyn Peake, writer, poet, war artist and painter, was brought up as a young boy in China. This strange and exotic part of the world, his own drawings and certain 20th century painters inspired the look of the production. The buildings are an intentional and curious hybrid of styles. Many of the props and the rituals suggest the timelessness of the East.
Gormenghast!
Yet, Gormenghast is in a sense everywhere and nowhere. The social scene, costume and manners suggest the European 18th or 19th century class system. The soldiery are decidedly Germanic. The school system, where the young Earl is educated, is definitely English.
It's break, young lordship. Milk and a biscuit.
Yet outside the castle, we could be in an Oriental bazaar. The beauty of Gormenghast is how well everything blends together. The sets, the props, the costume and makeup, and of course, most crucially, the magnificent casting.
My dear, do not think...
No, Wilfred, I do not think. Thought is for mortals. I am a woman.
Blue screen techniques were used extensively in many of the scenes. They were essential to create the extraordinary scale of this weird Alice in Wonderland world.
All of this. Look, there.
And in making the few look like the many. Think of the money we saved by duplicating a mere 100 people for this hillside ritual. And think of the trouble we saved by doing the same thing with cats. Thank God for the digital age. The biggest things in Gormenghast were often the smallest. Look again at these models to your right. They didn't just point a camera at them.
One of the problems, obviously, if you're building an immense city, is you've got to be able to see the city. And the conventional way is to do that, obviously, with models. And I, a long time ago, developed another way of doing it, which is all underwater. I put various chemicals in the water to increase atmospheric haze and all sorts of things like that. It does give the feeling of mass. Everything looks very, not so much enormous as massive.
He's ugly. So are you? I like him better now he's ugly.
Costume, makeup and synchronized acting work wonderfully together to contribute to the scenes. First of ambition.
Who's he?
I am your servant, madam. Madam.
Then of imprisonment, and finally of grisly decay of the Earl's disgruntled but stupid sisters, Clarice and Cora. The planning for Gormenghast was just as detailed and meticulous as for Walking with Dinosaurs.
It took me nearly 5 months to draw the storyboard. That one's done and never has to be done again. When they're all red, that's when I'm very happy.
The storyboard told it all before a single shot was filmed. So let's end almost where we began and see how all that planning paid off.
Look out! It's the headmaster!
Head count, Secretary Barton Dinosaurs at the head count. All boys to be counted. The headmaster!
Goodbye, Spike. Ah, well, can't be helped. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little taste. Oh, manners. A little taste of what went on in the making of these two series.
How the...
Stay behind if you'd like to see the exhibits, and there are more videos. Buy a TV license if you're feeling guilty. And thank you so much for coming. Goodbye.